So another piece of evidence that Christians claim is Jesus performing miracles. And unfortunately, this one's really difficult to research. You kind of have to just take it on a case-by-case basis. But there was a bit of a summary or possible explanations. So the first thing is that miracle and non-miracle healing abilities of Jesus were overstated. There was 6 to 20 years of oral traditions at the minimum, just for like the first source, which was Q, followed by Mark, 36 to 40 years after his death. So anywhere from 6 to 40 years of oral traditions and copying manuscripts. Actually, I don't even know about copying manuscripts because it was orally for like 36 to 40 years, or 6 to 40 years. So that's a lot of time for the story to become exaggerated and messed up because of oral passing of the story. And so another possibility is Christians simply wanted the beliefs to be more convincing, so they intentionally made more impressive stories. And we can see that with the quotes of Josephus, and there's a few other situations where we can just see that Christians want to make things seem more convincing or real than they are, like with the Exodus ministries or whatever that was claiming to have found stuff under the Red Sea. They did not. There's been a lot of archaeological trips up to the Mount Ararat looking for Noah's Ark evidence, and they almost always quote come back with something. But then just also the healing, or the martyrdom issues. There are 6 conflicting accounts with some of the martyred apostles that were created hundreds of years after. So that's all evidence that somebody is lying or making things up. So making things up is not out of the question at all. And then the other option is it simply didn't happen. So because all we really have to go on is the Bible says so. So those are some different possible explanations that are reasonable in my opinion and natural. They don't require a supernatural event. And so let's go ahead and look at, another thing is miracle workers were apparently common, and so were mythical statuses. So for example, Roman Emperor Vespasian, alive between 9 and 79, has been recorded by Tacitus, one of the historians, and he was known to have healed the blind and make useless limbs work. Apollonius of Tyanna was another miracle worker / healer, and this one may be a little bit deceitful comparison because we don't actually know the level of skills that he had. Was he just knowledgeable, or was he an actual quote miracle worker like Vespasian and Jesus had claimed to have been? And there's others, and then there's also parallels. The stories are very similar. You can check those out, but the story of Emperor Vespasian and Jesus healing the blind is very similar, and so you can see parallels being drawn. And then another thing is that a lot of even historical figures had mythological status. So Alexander the Great had visited the bottom of the sea. There was a permanent mark from a serpent on her body after birth. I think this is from one of these sources here. The assassination of Julius Caesar. Caesar was received into the stars, and then Tacitus tells how Vespasian healed a blind man and a lame man in Alexandria. And this one might not be an accurate example, but there's a couple examples of mythical things, supernatural things being done, even by existing historical figures like Alexander the Great. So I wouldn't really call this a miracle, but I've heard that Jesus wouldn't have drawn large crowds. And I think this was from Revolution. But the issue with the crowds is, first of all, Jesus was a prophet teaching messages, and people were illiterate. So, and the books of the Bible hadn't been written yet. It had to be spoken. So I bet he did have crowds, but there's no proof that he healed people through supernatural miracles or naturalistic means, other than with what Josephus said, that he provided did surprising feats. So I would say that he's got as much proof for healing as the other guy, which was how historian Tacitus talked about Vespasian. So they're very similar in abilities, at least according to history. So there's nothing necessarily special about this yet. And I don't believe Vespasian was claiming to be God or a prophet or anything like that. I would have to double check on that. But so basically, so far his miracles are not exactly divine any more than some other guy that was also doing similar stuff. So this isn't necessarily proof yet. And so yeah, he did have crowds, but there's also no proof that he drew large crowds. It's kind of a weird claim. Christianity grew at a similar pace as the Mormon church. And so this was found in How Jesus Became God. Christianity grew a 40% rate every 10 years, similar to the Mormon church. So it didn't necessarily grow any faster or whatever. So I'm not really sure what drawing large crowds had. Like, first of all, we can't prove it, or there's no proof of it. And then also, what does that really even mean? And then Islam's a major religion too. And I'm sure most people were illiterate then. So I'm sure the Prophet Muhammad drew large crowds as well. It doesn't really prove that you're God. It just proves that he was able to draw large crowds. And it doesn't even prove that. It's just a claim. So anyway, moving on. And also, if he was actually able to make limbs grow back or other supernatural things, then I am positive that these things would have been documented by Josephus or Tacitus or whoever in a more, I don't know, in a way that expresses the divineness of his feats, you know, not just like a spiritual or surprising feats, but like impossible feats or something. I don't know, but it's just, considering Vespasian has another historian writing about him also doing miracles or amazing feats, it's just not really proof. And then let's see. So that was large crowds. And then Lazarus. So Lazarus being raised from the dead is one of the biggest like miracles that Jesus performed. So let's talk about that one. The claim is that Lazarus raised from the dead would have been easy to fact check. He was brother of Mary and Martha. A miracle says to have taken place in Bethany, 2 miles from Jerusalem. All someone would have had to do, since a few people would still have been alive to check, is to go to Bethany and ask someone if Lazarus had ever been raised from the dead. I don't really consider this proof. Say 10 people go back and check and it was a lie. Then what? They probably would have had better things to do than start a crusade to tell everyone the truth. Some people believed and others didn't, especially when you consider that myths and superstition was more common then. Almost everyone had some religion to follow and a prophet to listen to. So most likely they would have just been like, oh, he lied, and then move on with their life. And yeah, but anyway, there's another comment on this. So let's give the apologists the benefit of the doubt. Let's say Gospel of John was written extremely early in the late 60s, and then soon after that, those who read it would be inclined to go back and fact check. Jerusalem was taken over by Judean rebels in 66, then besieged and destroyed by the Romans in 70. As Josephus writes, Jerusalem was so thoroughly razed to the ground by those that demolished it to its foundations that nothing was left that could ever persuade visitors that it had once been a place of habitation. So imagine the apologist's scenario. A curious reader goes to the ruins of Jerusalem, copy of John in hand, asking any Roman soldier he can find amidst the rubble about a strange event from 30 years earlier. But it doesn't really matter. Whether they could verify the stories, we'd have no reason to believe that they even would. People don't go out of their way to fact check. This is kind of what I've been saying. So, yeah. So this war and everything being taken over in 66 is also problematic. So they would have had nothing to be able to fact check anyway. So once again, this is not proof. We have no evidence for Lazarus being raised from the dead, unfortunately. And I think that's it for miracles. So If there's a specific miracle that may have more evidence, then I'd be interested in looking at it. But so far, there's zero proof of any miracles happening either. So what actually happened? We don't know. Sure, Jesus could have raised Lazarus from the dead, but it's more likely the author of the gospel just wrote it down to be more convincing, and nobody ran over to Bethany to check. Or if they did and found out it was a lie, they probably told a few people, and some people argued about it, maybe. But the message kept spreading. So despite it being untrue, some people believed, others didn't, just like today. So nothing really miraculous at this point. Another possibility is that Lazarus wasn't actually dead. Maybe he was just unconscious or, something. I don't know, in a coma and he woke up. I don't know. But maybe he wasn't dead. The only reason I would believe these miracles happened is not because the evidence is strong enough, because there's plenty of room for doubt. The only reason I would believe is because I want to believe. And me wanting to believe doesn't make it actually true.